Our topic for today will be on globalization in economic context. And in the textbook page 162, 164. So the objective for our lesson today is listed here. We are going to understand what globalization is, identify the skills to analyze and interpret the characteristics of globalization, and demonstrate an understanding of the arguments for and against globalization. So what is globalization? Globalization in general terms is the purpose of interaction and integration among people, companies, and governments worldwide. So integration among people, companies, and government worldwide, we're talking about the listed here: technology, capital mobility, labor mobility, improved transportation, lower tariffs, and multinational companies. So these multinational companies are also known as MNCs. So MNCs are multinational companies. Can you give me an example of a multinational company that we have in PNG?
ExxonMobil. ExxonMobil.
ExxonMobil, yes, correct. What else?
Coca-Cola.
Coca-Cola.
Yeah. Coca-Cola is a very good example. What about technology in globalization? Technology?
Smartphones.
I
see. Doesn't.
What else? Machinery? Computers? What about capital mobility? What are we talking about when we say capital mobility? We're talking about inflows and outflows of cash or capital. So capital covers investment, savings, transfers, everything that we have seen in our balance of payment. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes.
Now, labor mobility. In labor mobility, what are we talking about in relation to globalization?
Workers.
Talking about expertise, is that right?
Yeah.
And
Globalization and all that.
So for example, construction workers. So like we have explained in the past, I have explained that with labor mobility, because of tied aid and grants, some of the labor force that we are supposed to provide, provided by the countries that give us those grant or aid. So labor mobility is a common factor in globalization. The next is improved transportation. Yes, we have improved transportation in both shipping, air, and land. Lower tariffs depends on the market, the international market. So in our exchange rate, we talked about international exchange, foreign exchange, and lowering tariff is affected by the exchange in the international market. So shall we move on?
Yes.
So what is globalization in an economic context? So economic globalization refers to the increasing interdependence of world economies as a result of the growing scale of cross-border trade of commodities and services, flow of international capital, and wide and rapid spread of technology. So you can see that technology is a very important factor in globalization. The next one is another definition for globalization in economic context is economic globalization refers to the widespread international movement of goods, capital, service, technology, and information. Once again, ICT. And globalization, economic globalization primarily comprises the globalization of production, finance, markets, technology, organizational regimes, institutions, cooperation, and labor. So in other words, we are talking about bringing all these things under one very big umbrella, organizing production, finance, markets, technology, organizational regime, and institutions into one very big market. Is that clear?
Yes.
So let's move on. So this is just simplifying what I've put in the previous page. Trade and transaction, migration or movement of people, capital investment and investment movement, and dissemination of knowledge is simply talking about technological improvement and ICT. So let's explain what are the characteristics and benefits of globalization. So there are several characteristics that you can find in your textbook. So let's see and go through these ones given here. The first one, free trade without restrictions. So free trade, we are referring to what item here? Or what factor in international trade? We are talking about exports and imports of goods and services. Economic interdependence increases in the international market. The third characteristic is maximum utilization of ICT for international trade and movement of capital flows. So let's talk about this one. How is ICT used in international trade and movement of capital flows? Anyone know this? Are you all there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I can do that through online trading and all that.
So how is capital flows involved in globalization or in the utilization of ICT by capital flows? So in this one, we are talking about the transactions. Remember, in our balance of payment, we said we have credit, which is inflows, and debit, which are outflows. So don't forget that. So in capital flows using ICT, we are talking about direct transfers of cash or capital, or we are talking about automatic deductions in our account. Is that clear? So even we have individual automatic payments, for example, like loans, in our PNG account, our bank account, we also have automatic payments that are deducted from our account. The next one, the ability to have a 24 hours operational banking and financial networks throughout the world. So for this one, we are talking about even the time that we are sleeping, there is still transactions going on around the world. So if we are expecting some money from, for example, USA, and it is about 9 o'clock in the night in Papua New Guinea, that transaction will still come into our banks. And by the time it's morning and 9 o'clock, our bank opens, and that person that goes to check that transaction will find that the money is already there. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. The next one, it removes control from the government in banking, financial activities, and capital flows. So how does globalization remove control from the government in banking especially? Anyone want to answer this?
So, Miss, can you repeat the question?
How does globalization or transfer or banking financial activities is removed from the government's control through globalization?
Um,
Okay, so well, if you can answer that, then think about it. But control from the government is removed by globalization because the cash or the exchange rate is determined by the exchange market. Is that right?
yes.
Okay. So because we are using the floating exchange rate, the government does not have much control over our banking or financial activities, capital flows that comes from overseas or going out of our country. Is that clear?
Yes.
So shall we move on?
Yes.
Okay, the next one is globalization promotes privatization. So have we gone through privatization process in PNG?
Yes.
Yes, we did.
Yes.
So a lot of our statutory bodies have been changed to
Privatized.
privatization in the past years. It also increases speculative transaction in the world rather than real economic transaction. So in speculative transaction, what are we talking about? Anyone wants to answer this? Speculative transaction? In speculative transactions, we are talking about what we have already budgeted for. Is that right? So in our budget, we said that probably we are going to receive 60 million from our international transaction. But we have not received that money yet. So in real economic transactions, that is not realized yet. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. The next one, there are two benefits that comes from globalization. One, increased opportunities for competition, and two, increased in the world trade. So from all that we have learned from your balance of payment and from your exchange rate, these all contribute to increase in world trade. And increased competition, opportunities for competition, our local industries are going to compete with international industries in the same production of the same product. So can you give me an example of a product that is produced locally but also produced from outside?
Coffee, tea,
Coffee.
Honey.
Coffee,
Honey.
not money.
Honey.
Honey.
Correct.
Honey bee.
So we have our Highlands honey, and we also have honey from Australia. So that is increasing our competition in purchasing of or buying and selling of honey. So is that clear? Can we
yes.
move on?
Yes. Yes, we can.
So next one is, what is economic interdependence? Since economic globalization refers to increasing economic interdependence of international economics across the world through rapid increase in cross-border movements of goods, services, technology, capital flows, and labor, economic interdependence occurs when one economy depends on one or more of the other economies. So is PNG in this boat? Sorry.
Yeah.
Papua New Guinea placed in.
Yes.
Yes, we are economically interdependent.
Interdependent.
Economically, we are interdependent. So economic interdependence started with international trade. Remember that. But becomes globalized when economies cannot survive without the other economies. So we have gone through it with international trade, and we learned that we have some control in international trade. But when we become globalized, that means that we are more dependent on imports or from other countries, products from other countries to survive. So is that true for PNG?
Mm,
Yeah.
Yes, we are interdependent on other economies to provide us the products that we cannot produce ourselves. Okay, so economic interdependence have both its positive and negative impacts. In the positive side, we have benefits, and on the negative side, we have risks. So on the positive side, we have technological innovation, we have foreign direct investment, and we have economies of scale. So what does economies of scale talk about? Talks about the GDP. Is that right? Whether increase or decrease. And GDP because of production. Technological innovation So now we have used Zoom. That's technological innovation. Is that right? Or we have
Yeah.
technological
Yes.
improvement. So those are the benefits of globalization and interdependence. Foreign direct investment. Foreign direct investment, that means that an individual can bring in money from overseas or get a loan from overseas without going through the Bank of Papua New Guinea. The Bank of Papua New Guinea will only give clearance. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now there are negative side to this interdependence. We become very interdependent that we cannot survive without any other economy. We are not self-reliant anymore. Is that clear?
Yes.
And we are also going to face inequitable distribution. That means we have to keep up with everybody or else we are going to be left far behind. And it is also a threat to our sovereignty. So in sovereignty, what are we talking about?
Independence.
Country? Yes? Did somebody answer?
Independence.
Our independence, our integrity, our identity will be under threat from globalization. So are we clear?
Yes.
Okay, good. So, the characteristics that we went through are for general globalization. What about the characteristics of economic globalization? So growing economic interdependence, we have said that already. We have improved technology to facilitate globalized economic activities, development of global telecommunication infrastructure, internet, communication satellites, and mobile phones help dramatically to facilitate globalization. So all these are true for PNG. So we have improved technology, we have development of infrastructure in internet, communication satellites, and mobile phones that have helped us to have access to the other world. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So you can even travel to Paris without actually getting on a plane. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, virtually.
Yeah. Okay. There is. Let's continue. Another characteristic is a significant drop in communication cost for voice, text, and data as a result of faster and wider spread of advanced ICT technologies. So that means that in our voice, we are no longer using copper wire. We have switched that to a different fiber that helps to be more fast and efficient. Our text messages, now we are using email, we are using internet and all the social media to send information and data as a result of advancement in ICT. The next one, removal of trade barriers. So removal of trade barriers gives us access to more free movement of goods and services. It talks about movement of goods and services. Then we have integration of economies between developing and developed countries. So which country do we have good relationship with? We have developed good relationships with
China.
China, yes. Who else?
New
Australia.
Zealand.
Australia is always
Australia.
our
New
major
Zealand.
trading partner, and just recently, USA.
Whoa.
The next one, growth of foreign direct investments as a means of economic growth for developing economies. So once again here we see foreign direct investments. So if somebody here gives approval for a company in Australia or USA to come and invest, then they will have access to foreign direct investment. So they don't need any approval from anybody. They just need approval to establish from IPA and for the Bank of PNG to give clearance for that investment to come in. So that contributes to economic growth for us. The next one is better access to global financial markets for corporate and national borrowers. So our national borrowers or our national entrepreneurs can always get a loan from the other countries. So let's stop here because we have only 10 minutes left.
Oh.
Are we going to stop?
Mm,
Let's continue. Do you want us to continue or we take a break?
uh,
Ask Travis.
Miss, we finish at 3, so if you want us to rest for like 4 minutes, we can come back. What is going on?
What time is it now?
It's 2:30. I mean, it's going at 2:30. So Miss, you can just continue until 3.
Okay.
Hey.
I'm just saying, so we can get it over with.
Yeah, Miss, you can continue. Get it over with. I agree with Travis.
Thank you, thank you.
Para.
Full purple.
Jum. Why is internet so expensive in PNG?
Sorry, this thing is upgrading. That's
It's okay, Miss.
It's alright, Miss.
It's okay.
I'm just trying using this thing and I'm
Amo.
not sure about it.
Blue Pro, you can pay $14.99. Annual is $12.49.
Save $30.
Yeah, save $30. A host can have unlimited meetings. Each meeting supports up to 100 participants. Questions? Contact sales.
Travis, we use your Visa card and we pay for it.
Sure.
Pin number 706.
Give me a few minutes.
No,
I look for Mr.
619.
G. Hey.
Stagger. You writing that?
Hey, who's writing the name? Oi, tata kami ba pinis?
What?
Block music.
Ay, ay, ay. I already done na. Text.
Stagger, you still there?
Okay. So what do you want to do?
I'll just continue with my. Is it time? Oh, yeah.
I don't know. There we go. This. Source.
So, Mister, how do I unmute them? Or they do that themselves?
Let them don't talk.
Okay. Okay, so can we continue?
Yes.
Yes.
You have 30 more minutes, miss.
We'll continue with characteristics of economic globalization. So greater labor mobility between countries than before, but subjected to certain limits. International agreements forced economies to promote free trade and resolve related issues, and increased opportunities for trade and also increased competition that we have discussed in the general globalization. And availability of a greater variety of goods and services to consumers at competitive prices. So greater variety of goods. Yes, we have greater variety of goods in our supermarkets today. So you can go and choose the flavor of ice cream that you like, the flavor of biscuit or types of biscuit that you would want to have. So they all give us competitive prices. Increased opportunities for trade and also increased competition, and international agreements forced economies to promote free trade and resolve related issues. So in this one, remember, I discussed with you in our previous lesson on trade and agreement. In that one, we talked about, I used telecommunication as an example. And on our international calls going in and out of Papua New Guinea. So in doing that, we have to also sign an international agreement to allow for our calls to go and terminate where we want them to go and terminate. So that's in telecommunication. But in other sectors or in other areas of international trade, they also need international agreements. Greater labor mobility between countries. We have seen that in PNG. We have greater or a lot of expatriate workers that are coming into our country to help us in with our what production or development that we are limited. So they come in to help us. But sometimes it's because of some, like I said, tied agreement or aid or grant. So they are subjected to certain limitations. So that brings us to the arguments for and against globalization. So we are going to look at 4 arguments for globalization first. The first one is greater interdependence brings comparative advantages. So after we have studied comparative advantages, let's come up with an example where we are given a greater interdependence on another economy to produce what we can produce, but because they have the comparative advantage. So can you give me an example? Can you hear me?
Yes, miss.
So what would be an example of greater interdependence on a country that has comparative advantage than us? What type of product can we talk about?
Um,
Um,
Let's say milk. Is that okay?
yes.
yeah.
Okay. Because we are getting milk from Australia and New Zealand instead of our own because of comparative advantage. Is that right? Their production of milk
Yes.
is cheaper than us.